Pushing Back the Shadows, support and awareness for mental health. Hello and welcome to episode 28 of the Pushing Back the Shadows podcast. My name's Alex Davis. I'm the main author and the founder of Pushing Back the Shadows. So today is the next step in my journey. Over the past couple of weeks and the next couple of weeks as well, I'm taking you through my interpretation of depression, what depression is for me. Now, I believe I've stipulated before, this is a very, very unique illness. It's something that is unique to each individual. So what I'm saying might not be what other people are feeling. There may be crossovers, bits of it other people may think, yeah, do you know what, that's me. But at the same time, other people may think, yeah, no, that's not really me. So this is how depression is to me. And this particular episode is entitled Depression, the Darkness. So we have looked at how depression is a liar. We've looked at how it's a comforter. And today I want to look at the darkness. It's something that I find is certainly not really explained, but mentioned a lot. People feel like they are going through darkness. But as I say, it's not really explained. And to somebody on the outside looking in, it can be a bit of a strange thing to say. People may think, well, how is it going through the darkness? What's that all about? And really, depression to a lot of us can feel like we are going through a dark tunnel. And it's easy at this point to turn around and say, oh, there's a light at the end of the tunnel, don't worry. But for a lot of us, it's like that light has been switched off or obscured in some way, and we can't see that hope. So imagine that for a second. Imagine that you have a path that you're walking along and you can't see the end. So sometime, this is a good number of months ago, I went for a walk up on Cannock Chase. I'd really recommend it if you guys haven't been, if you do live in the vicinity, because it is a really nice place to walk. And so I was up on the chase and I was walking with somebody, and we decided we were going to do, because we looked at the trails and there were kind of almost two circles, we said, you know what, we're going to do the smaller circle. Because we're not particularly fit, we haven't walked massively before, so yeah, we're going to do the small circle. And it was kind of imagine like a figure of eight. You have the option of doing all the way around on the outside, or there was that little cut through. And it was kind of, the options were you did almost like a third of the trail, or you did the whole thing. And so we were going to do that, and we walked, and we're following the markers as you do. Got the guide that we've printed out that tells us exactly which markers we need to follow. Naturally, we started at like marker 8 or 9 or something, you know, kind of at the end of the trail and went backwards, but that's beside the point. And we got so far round, and we're thinking, well, this is taking forever. We should have come across such and such a point by now. Surely we should be doubling back. And eventually we come across this stream, and we're saying, that's not right. That isn't right. And after a moment, this person that I'm walking with kind of turns around, looks at the map, looks at the stream, sits there and says, oh, Peaceville. We're over here. So as it turns out, at that point, we were nearly halfway around the big loop. We'd missed the marker, which I did find out why. As we were walking back, we found the marker. It was the sign indicating which post it was there on the one side as we were going back. We looked, it wasn't there on the direction we'd been going, so it wasn't, strictly speaking, our fault. But hey, that's kind of the point. Depression can feel like we are walking along a path, following whatever guidelines we have available, but like there is no end. Just like we couldn't find the end of the trail. We actually ended up turning around and walking back the way we'd come. Just like we can't find the end on that trail. Sometimes, with depression, we can't see the end. In fact, I say sometimes, most of the time, we can't see that end. Similarly, we get the guidance, we have the therapy, we have the doctor's appointments, but even then, that doesn't necessarily help us see where we are. It took a long time for us to twig with the map exactly where we were, and sometimes that's the way with depression. You don't necessarily know when you're going to get out of it, if you're going to get out of it, how you're going to get out of it. You just know that you're in it, and you cannot see the end. Now, needless to say, I survived my walk. I think I did 15, 20,000, 21,000 steps, if I remember correctly. It was quite a hefty walk. But so, really with depression, you do feel like you're getting exhausted. You're going through that darkness, through that tunnel, and you can't see the end. Another reason that I would say it's the darkness is not just because it's like a dark tunnel, it can be a bit like a dark cloud. And it kind of obscures your mind a bit, where people would normally see positive things and they'd be all happy because, oh, this is great, that's great, this is happening. Even things like, oh, I'm thankful I woke up this morning. You don't necessarily get that with depression. And this, I think, is the side that people tend to see a little more. Because really a lot of people would kind of conceive depression as being a bit like Eeyore from Winnie the Pooh, or even Marvin the Paranoid Android off of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which again is something I've referenced in the past, the meaning of life, 42 and all that, and what that really means. And now that I've said that, yes, I will actually include a link to that post if you guys want to read that. But so, people do perceive it a lot like that, and really it is that dark cloud kind of penetrating our minds, taking all the joy and a lot of the positivity out of it. And just like dark clouds, which I'll come onto in a second, you can't just kind of wish them away. It's all very well looking up at the sky and, hey, I live in England and it rains most of the time. At least feels like it. But you can't just look at the sky and wish the clouds away. And the same way it doesn't work with depression. You can't just think positively and off it goes. So it is like a cloud, like a dark tunnel. And there is that emphasis on it being a dark place. There are a couple of other ways to describe it as being dark, but I'll come on to them in just a second. But just while we have the quick couple of second break that I normally put in, I just want you to stop and think for a second. Have you heard of the black dog? Have you heard of the black dog? Have a think about that, and I'll be right back. You're listening to Pushing Back the Shadows. So the black dog. Has anybody heard of that? Is that something that you guys are familiar with? I first encountered the black dog when I was actually as a youth worker within my church community. I was supporting somebody with depression and found myself not really understanding it. Now, where I worked at the time, this is again back at the bank, I met counsellor Judy who you will have seen an interview that we did with Judy, and she introduced me to a video by the World Health Organization, and it's entitled I Had a Black Dog, His Name Was Depression. And I watched it and I suddenly said, do you know what, that makes so much sense. So much sense. And I'll include a link for the video if you want to have a look at it, because for explaining it to friends and to family, it is an absolutely brilliant resource. And there are quite a few of those out there, the brilliant resources. I mean, I used the, when I went and did a talk at Matthew Bolton College in Birmingham, I used the spoon theory to talk about that as well. But I had a black dog, his name was Depression, and the whole idea is that this black dog kind of follows you around everywhere you go. It kind of starts off small and grows and grows and grows, kind of demonstrating that the problem itself, if left untreated, or even sometimes while being treated, can become more serious. And sometimes the dog hounds us. He's not just a kind of one of those more docile puppies that just kind of sits there. A bit like, because oddly enough, I do have a black dog. My parents, they have a dog called Susie, and she is black. But, so Susie, when you come to the door, she will bark, and she will sound like a Rottweiler. But then you open the door, and she's straight onto her back, you know, paws in the air, saying, "Tummy rub, please, tummy rub." So the black dog in itself is not like Susie, really. Some days it will be just kind of, it's there. And it is. It's there. You can't get rid of it. But other days it's a bit more vicious. And the one image that stuck out with me on this video was when the person who's got the black dog, who's struggling with that depression, is kind of snapping at somebody. And you can see he's got his hand behind him, and the black dog has clamped his teeth down on the man's hand. And it's a very kind of poignant image, because a lot of the time it is the black dog behind us that is making us react in certain ways. Now, don't get me wrong, that's not an excuse. We do need to learn to modify that behaviour. We need to learn to cope with it. But it explains it. So that's, in a nutshell, that is the black dog, and I would recommend that you check out the YouTube video as well, because as somebody who at that point had no experience of depression at all, I found it very useful. It made perfect sense to me. The other way that I describe depression, and I've heard a few people say a couple of things about this one, is it's like a dark passenger. It is very much like a dark passenger. Those of you who might have been Dexter fans when Dexter was on will know roughly what I'm referring to. But really, the dark passenger just, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. So I'm going to read you what Dexter actually says about his dark passenger. Just to kind of backtrack a little bit, Dexter is a blood spatter analyst, and he works for the police. Don't ask me where, because I really can't remember. I want to say Florida, Miami, I think. But he's also a serial killer. He's got that kind of serial killer instinct inside of him, and the desire to kill. So this is what he has to say about it. And instead of thinking of a serial killer, think about depression instead. Think about the dark tunnel, dark cloud, the black dog, everything that I've just described. And then maybe you'll see why I refer to mine as a dark passenger. Dexter says, "I just know there's something dark in me, and I hide it. I certainly don't talk about it, but it's there. Always. This dark passenger. And when he's driving, I feel alive, half sick with the thrill of complete wrongness. I don't fight him. I don't want to. He's all I've got. Nothing else could love me, not even, especially not me. Or is that just a lie the dark passenger tells me? Because lately there are these moments when I feel connected to something else, someone. It's like the mask is slipping and things, people who never mattered before, are suddenly starting to matter." Does that sound familiar to you? What do you think? Does that sound familiar to you? Is that something that you or somebody you know would have experienced at some point? I mean, potentially in this case where he says the mask is slipping and other people start to matter, that's not necessarily kind of pertinent to this particular example, but the dark passenger is something that sometimes he takes over driving. A bit like when I mentioned the black dog biting the man's hand, sometimes he takes over. And at the same time, sometimes he sits in the passenger seat. Sometimes it's just there. And that in itself is kind of like the good days, the bad days. Sometimes on the bad days, the dark passenger's driving. He's not a passenger, he's driving. On other days, he sits in the passenger seat. He might tell you where to go or how to do whatever you're trying to do, but he's in the passenger seat. You're driving. Another quick quote that I do want to read to you, again from Dexter. This is from later on in the series when he meets somebody called Lila, who becomes his sponsor, because she's got her own set of problems, as you would discover. And she kind of says, but there's no way that I could know what you've experienced, right? I couldn't possibly feel that need. Like 1,000 hiding voices whispering, this is you, who you are. And you fight the pressure, the growing need rising like a wave, prickling and teasing and prodding to be fed. But the whispering gets louder until it's screaming now, and it's the only voice you hear, the only voice you want to hear, and you belong to it, to this shadow self, to this. And then Dexter finishes with dark passenger. Now that actually ties in really well to what I was saying last week about depression being a comforter, because you get that familiarity with it and the voices grow and grow inside your head, and like she said, it's the only voice you hear, the only voice you want to hear. It links back in really well with the concept of the dark cloud, because clouds can grow, storms can brew, and that is how it feels. That is the darkness of depression. At the very least, that's my darkness of depression. But what do I do with that, though? How do I get through that darkness? How do any of us get through the darkness? I've got a few thoughts on how I get through, and I want to share them with you. One or two different things that I've found. I'll be right back. Pushing back the shadows, support and awareness for mental health. So what do I do? How do I cope with my dark passenger? How do I take back that control? What do I use to get myself through that darkness? As I've already said, sometimes the light at the end of the tunnel looks like it's switched off. You don't necessarily see that it's there, and especially on the bad days, you really can't see the light. Now, one thing, and I've mentioned this a number of times now, I tend to use video games to cope, particularly in this case Fallout 4. Going on to things like Fallout, and even like Bethesda's other main series, The Elder Scrolls, going on to things like those, creating a character, playing through that character, doing effectively what you want, when you want, and being who you want. There's something about that can free me from my mind. Can you relate to that? And if actually there are anybody who does play things like Fallout or that, or finds video games quite helpful, do feel free to drop me a comment, because I'm quite interested in that. I'd like to talk more about things like that. But so really, being able to go and do things like that, because, I mean, the premise, for those of you who don't play, Fallout 4, you create your character, and yes, there's like a main storyline that you can follow, but there are loads and loads of like side paths that you can go down, and you can choose, in this case, who you want to side with, what you want to do. Do you want to be kind of a force for good, a force for evil? And you can customize, and I was quite amazed with this when I played it the first time, because I don't think any other game has really had this level of customization. But really, you can customize every aspect of your character. You can give him or her whatever skills you want. You can even go right down and change like the shape of the nose and the dimensions on the face, make it longer or narrower or whatever you want to do. And that in itself can be quite, well, the only word I can think of is liberating. You get to go and do whatever you want, be whoever you want. You're not stuck with your dark passenger. Now, aside from the fact that I use that to cope with it, one of the reasons that I'm mentioning Fallout here is because one of the things they added in one of the DLC extra content things is the ability to create fireworks. Now, we did have a moment a couple of days ago where my godson was over, and he was going to show me and his mum this firework display that he'd made. And after a few technical hitches, it was actually a good display. So then I decided I was going to try one. And one of the things that you can do, it's not just like the colours and the sparkles, but you can also create these weather change shells. It sounds very futuristic tech, you know. But you can choose like kind of clear sky, or you can summon in rain, or you can summon in a radiation storm, which is quite common given that it's post-apocalyptic after the nuclear fallout type game. And some people would perceive, you know, oh, you're on antidepressants, so must be great. But unfortunately, it doesn't work in the same way as one of those weather change shells. You have the rain clouds, you activate the shell, you fire up a weather change one for clear skies, and poof, the clouds start to clear. But antidepressants really don't work that way. If anything, they take your tunnel and they start to introduce kind of little bits of lighting in that tunnel, so you can see a little bit clearer. So you can see that light at the end of the tunnel a little bit more. So that ties into where I want to talk a little bit about antidepressants. I am on antidepressants. I'm also on a mood stabilizer, because those are what I need to get through. Therapy does do a little bit, not as much yet as I'd like it to. The previous attempt at therapy did not work for me, but it does work for other people. But so video games, medication, and then writing. If you're listening to the podcast, the chances are you came through from one of our social media accounts, and you'll see on those links to different posts that I've done on the website itself. And as I start with every podcast episode, I say that I'm the main author behind Pushing Back the Shadows, because I write about my experiences, and I write some of the tips that I have for friends and family to help understand it more, but also for sufferers to help get them through. And that's another way that I cope. Writing it down takes it out of my head, and for a second, I'm not trapped under the influence of the dark passenger. I mean, absolutely, I still have days where I can't get out of bed. Some days I will have really kind of worked hard, you know, writing content left, right and centre, so I can schedule it just in case there's a bad day. And that's okay. It happens to all of us. So I write. I sing. I take medication. I attend therapy. And I play video games. Just a handful of things that work for me, that help reduce that darkness. Now, saying things like that, it doesn't mean that there's always darkness. Yes, there is a black cloud, or a black dog, or a dark passenger, whatever you want to call it, but there is not always darkness. And I'm sure if you talk to other people who struggle, other sufferers out there, I'm sure they will tell you the same thing. And if you've not heard much about depression and you do see all these kind of black and white images, talk about the darkness, you may be thinking, well, how's that possible? Thinking positive doesn't work. How can there not be darkness? Let's take a look. You're listening to Pushing Back the Shadows. So imagine for a second you're in a storm. A wonderfully big storm, because I don't know about you, I love a good thunderstorm. If I'm outside in it, not so much, but if I'm inside able to look out, then yeah, I like a good storm. Particularly, watching the rain run like rivers down the roads and watching the lightning. Yeah, sorry, I'm one of those. I love watching the lightning. I can't help it. There's just something very kind of mesmerising and beautiful about watching lightning. But so even in those darkest storms, and you see this a lot on like TV programs or films, even in the darkest storms, it's not completely dark, is it? Because you get the lightning. Granted, it doesn't happen with every storm, and sometimes I really wish it would, but you don't always have complete darkness. You do get those kind of flashes of lightning. And in a similar sense with going through the dark clouds or the storms of depression, you do get those flashes of light. I mean, just looking back at my last week, it's things like my goddaughter, or stepdaughter, depending on how you look at it. She sat at the table the other day, and she's been learning a little bit about where children come from. Not too graphic, thankfully, but she gets the concept that she was a baby in her mummy's tummy. And she looked at me and she said to me, "Alex, last week I was a baby in mummy's tummy." We're not going to argue with the fact that she wasn't. This is like nearly 4 years ago that she was. But anyway, so last week I was a baby in mummy's tummy. But it was only an accident. Mummy and Daddy were actually making cupcakes. And just, okay, you can sit there and say, well, no, don't be daft. Mummy and Daddy weren't making cupcakes, etc., etc. But something as daft as that, which apparently makes complete sense in her head, but something as daft as that can bring that little bit of light, and for a moment you forget where you were. I've lost count of the number of times that she does that. Not last week I was a baby in mummy's tummy and mummy and daddy were making cupcakes, not that bit, but when I'm having a bad day, she'll do something, or she'll say something, or even she'll just come and give me a great big hug, and it brings a bit of light into that darkness. Okay, it's not as dangerous as the flash of lightning. And yeah, okay, sometimes it strikes more than once in the same place. But really, even in the darkest storms, you can still get those flashes of light, even going through depression, where you can't see the light at the end of the tunnel. Sometimes there are, for want of a better word, windows in that tunnel. You can see the light outside. Or alternatively, there are, like the utility lights or construction lights that they put in tunnels to light them up. And you can see them. Sometimes there are light in that tunnel. And the other favourite example that I always give is about rainbows. Rainbows are a bit like a light at the end of the tunnel, but sometimes, when the sun comes out during the storm, you get a rainbow in the middle of the storm. Sometimes there can be those lights, those rainbows, those good moments. And just like I said with the black dog, where sometimes he's a bit like Susie, just rolls over, tummy rub. It's not always doom and gloom with depression. It's not quite the way people perceive it. Yes, it's darkness. And in some ways, it's emptiness, which is what I'm going to talk about next week. But it's not always completely, totally dark from start to finish. You have good days, you have bad days. So while depression is a darkness, it's one that we can get through. We can make it through to find the light at the end of the tunnel. And for all we know, that light is not there because it's actually around the corner. So that, to me, is depression. I've said before, it's a liar, it's a comforter, it's darkness, and it's also emptiness. But that is a subject for next week. So that's all from me for this week, guys. You take care. I will catch you next week. You'll know what time it is now. It's the time when I do the Patreon shout-outs. So thank you to all of our patrons. These are just a couple of our top paid patrons at the moment. So Shirley, Louise, Katie, Luce, Samantha, Cheryl, Yi, Tamara and Alex. Thank you for everything that you do to support us. We really do appreciate it. Guys, if you like what you're hearing and you want to help us to keep going, because we do have running costs, we have hosting costs, both for the podcast site and for the website, and other things like that. If you do want to support us, and it only has to be as little as like $1 a month, it doesn't even have to be much, or you can do a one-off, you're completely in control, then please do feel free to head over to our Patreon page. The link is always in the description of our podcasts. We'd really, really love to have your support. It would help us keep doing what we're doing, bringing you the content that we're bringing you. It helps us with our running costs, with publishing costs in terms of the book Pills and Blades that I've published, and a lot more. And we really, really would appreciate your support. So if you like what we're doing, if you have $1, $2, $3 that you could spare, and when I say dollars, it does accept, because a lot of our people actually are from the UK. It does do it in dollars, but it does convert. So just a little tip here, guys. If you are in the UK, okay, it does, add a little bit on occasionally for that, but it does work out cheaper. I didn't tell you that, but if you're on the UK, the $1 works out roughly to about 70-80p. So if you've got that little bit to spare and you'd like to keep supporting the work that we do, please do get involved. We'd love to have your support. So as always, the link is in the description. Do feel free to check it out. You do get rewards as well, so hey, it's a win-win. We bring you content and you get rewards for pledging. What can I say? But yeah, we'd really love your support. So again, thank you to Shirley, Louise, Katie, Luce, Sam, Cheryl, Yi, Tamara and Alex. You guys do brilliant work supporting us. Right, that's all from me for today. I'll let you guys go. Have a great day and a great week, and I shall catch you next week for episode 29 of the podcast, where I talk about depression, the emptiness. You've been listening to Pushing Back the Shadows. To find out more, head over to pushingbacktheshadows.com and hit subscribe to get all of our latest updates straight to your inbox. Alternatively, connect with us on Facebook, which is facebook.com/Alex Davis PBTS, or you can visit us on Twitter at Alex Davis PBTS. Enable Pushing Back the Shadows to continue supporting people in the mental health community, their friends and their family. By pledging just $1 a month, you could help us to continue supporting people with depression, with anxiety, with bipolar and other mental illnesses. You can also unlock exclusive rewards, behind the scenes, sneak previews of upcoming posts and much, much more. So head over to www.patreon.com/Alex Davis PBTS to find out more.